I think we can. I think we can begin now. Um, I want to start by saying this recording will be available after on our YouTube channel. So if anybody joined late, and I'll mention that at the Q&A period too. So hello and welcome back to those of you who are joining us for the second time. My name is Justine Stillborn. You can call me Teeny, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the second part of our grant webinar series. Journeys in Grants, Curatorial Travel and Opportunities. Today I'm joined by Amanda Bera, our membership coordinator, and Nandini Galka will join us a little later. She is our administrator. As we did for our first session, I want to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on Treaty 4 territory, I'm recording on Treaty 4 territory, traditional lands of the Nahiwak, Nakawe, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and homeland of the Métis Nation. As someone born and raised here, I recognize the deep Indigenous roots of this land, and we are honored to have guests joining us from all across Turtle Island, also known as North America. We acknowledge and celebrate the diverse Indigenous peoples and their invaluable contributions. The ICCA is committed to building meaningful relationships and working towards a more inclusive and respectful future for us all. At the ICCA, the Indigenous Curatorial Collective, our mission is to support, amplify Indigenous curatorial practices, fostering professional development, networking, and knowledge sharing within our communities and beyond. Today, we're focusing on a critical aspect of curatorial practice, which is grant writing, specifically research, travel, and funding. We are incredibly fortunate to have with us today Chris the Gatchalian, a renowned author, editor, and grant consultant who will be sharing their expertise on curatorial travel grants. Chris is based in Toronto and has an extensive experience in supporting artistic and literary practices. A note on participation, just as for housekeeping today, we encourage you to have your cameras on if you feel comfortable. It's fine if you don't. Please continue to use the chat for your questions. We will share all your questions to input in the chat with our speakers at the end of the session. Today's session is conducted only in English, so please have your questions ready in English. And so I will pass it over to Chris. Thank you, and thanks for joining us today.
Great. Thanks, Teeny, and thanks to ICCA, Amanda, Liz. It's great to be here. I'm really happy to share with you what I can share with you in terms of the grant writing process and the grant application process, which can be very mystifying for a lot of people, I know. But I speak as someone with a lot of experience in the granting world as well, as an artist who applies for grants regularly, but also as a grant writer. It's one of my many side gigs to make ends meet, is writing grants for folks, for fellow artists in all disciplines, and also as someone who has sat on a number of peer assessment juries, including one very recently. So I'll definitely be leaning into that today. During this presentation, and I think it'll be very helpful in terms of kind of just giving you an inside peek into what peer assessors look for when reading applications. So that's basically what's to be in store for today. Just a little briefly about myself. Here we go. Oops, sorry, getting ahead of myself here. So I'm a writer. That's my artistic practice. I work in theater and literature, but I'm also a grant writer and a grant consultant. And I developed a lot of my grant writing muscle actually as a result of being serving as executive producer, or sorry, executive director, artistic producer of the Frank Theater Company, which is a 2S LGBTQ mandated professional theater company based in Coast Salish territories, aka Vancouver. I would say 70% of my job was grant writing in that when I was doing that job. So I have a lot of experience doing this. Whether I like doing it is another, it's another story. Anyways, so yeah, and I have over 20 years of experience working as a creative here on Turtle Island. All right, so and I just want to gratefully acknowledge that I'm presenting today on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, Treaty 13 territory, Chiguranto, also known as Toronto. All right. And I'm glad, I think we have people from all over Turtle Island today, which is great. So, okay, so, all right, so our goals for this, for today in terms of, the things that I'm going to talk about and the key things that I hope you'll all have a clearer idea in terms of how to move forward with your grant applications is a clearer idea of how curatorial research travel can be funded, which grants support travel and research, how fiscal year timing works, and what juries are looking for in strong applications. All right. All right. So, what is curatorial research travel? Um, so this is something, like I said, I'm not in the visual arts, but I have started working actually with a number of artists who are in the visual arts and who are applying for money specifically for curatorial research travel. So, and a lot of you probably know this already, but essentially what curatorial research travel includes is studio visits with artists, community visits, um, meeting elders or knowledge keepers, visiting archives and collections, and also attending festivals, gatherings, and exhibitions, and building partnerships with institutions. So a really important point to remember is travel. Travel is research, right? And it needs to be framed as such in the travel grants that you apply for. It's not tourism. You'll know this already, but I just want to emphasize that it's research, right? It should be research-based, research-focused. All right, so why travel matters. And this is especially true, I think, for Indigenous curators. For Indigenous curators, research travel often involves relationship building, cultural exchange, community consultation, land-based knowledge, learning protocols. And yeah, I mean, it's often it's not just it isn't just like research. It's also relational work, right? And this all provides a rich context for the work, the curatorial work that you're going to be doing or that you propose to be doing. So, all right, so the main national funder, as most of you know, if you're in this part of Turtle Island, the northern part of Turtle Island is Canada Council for the Arts. And so the Canada Council for the Arts supports artists, curators, artistic research, cultural exchange. It also supports Indigenous-led initiatives. And I just wanted to maybe I just want to get a read of the room. How many people here have applied for Canada Council funding before? May just raise your hand. Or either virtually. Okay, we have a few people raising their hands. Okay, cool. Oh, it looks like my screen sharing. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, great. Sorry, I just want to make sure the screen, everyone can see the screen, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great, terrific. Okay. All right. So, okay, some of you have experience with Canada Council for the Arts funding. So, and so these are, so, but for those of you who don't, this is what Canada Council supports. All right. And so within Canada Council, they have a specific Indigenous program supporting Indigenous artists specifically, and that program is called Creating, Knowing, and Sharing. All right. So it supports Indigenous-led artistic projects, curatorial research, travel and knowledge exchange, relationship building, and it should be noted that applications that are taken in through creative knowing and sharing are assessed by all Indigenous juries. All right, so just that's an important thing to be assured of. They're completely Indigenous assessed. All right. Now, there's creative knowing and sharing, but Indigenous artists can also apply to the more general programs. So you can also, so for the context of our webinar, what would be most relevant for Indigenous for curators, Indigenous curators, if you want to apply also to in a non-Indigenous specific program, is travel grants. So travel grants to professional artists supports research travel, attending festivals or gatherings, networking, artistic exchange, and now the key thing about these travel grants, though, and this is what makes it a little quite different from the Creative Knowing and Sharing program, is that these grants, and it actually makes it different from most of the other programs in Canada Council. These travel grants are usually, I think they are usually internally assessed by program officers rather than juries. Okay, so that is it is a different pair of, a different set of eyes looking at it. Okay, and there are positives and negatives to that, right? So there are positives to having your jury be completely assessed by program officers, but obviously there are negatives as well, and we can dig into that if you want. I don't know how much help I can necessarily, because I'm not a program officer at Canada Council, but I can probably speak to that to a certain extent, right? What the pros and cons are of applying to the general travel grants program when it's going to be assessed by internally rather than externally. All right. Okay, so rolling programs. So rolling programs, which I think which travel grants, they have a rolling deadline. There's no like set deadline, and I believe, and I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's similar. I think it's the same with most of the programs in creating, knowing, and sharing. I don't think there are set deadlines either with those, but I could be wrong. But I think generally across the board, Canada Council's rolling deadlines for most, if not all, of their programs. Okay, but travel grants usually have rolling deadlines, faster decision timelines because they're internally assessed, simpler applications, and these grants are useful when travel opportunities arise quickly. All right. Now, this is getting up somewhat granular here, but I think it's important in terms of strategy. And I know that this is something that uh, Tina, you mentioned, you wanted me to address, and so happy to address it. And this is fiscal year timing. Okay, so for strategy, I think it's important to remember when Canada Council's fiscal year is, which is April 1st to March 31st. All right, so why this matters is because budgets are allocated per fiscal year. All right, so if there's money left over at the end of the year, um, they're usually quite anxious to get that money out the door. And I can actually speak from lived experience about why fiscal year timing is important, because I remember, as an artist, I applied for a grant to Canada Council. I applied for a Canada Council grant, and it was initially unsuccessful. It was at the time it operated Canada Council. This is before they revamped the program. It operated a bit differently. Um, you would get a letter in the mail saying that if you were unsuccessful, you might still be highly recommended, meaning that you were in the funding zone. You are recommended for funding, but they ran out of money, right? So, which is, yeah, it's very competitive, as you know, right? So, but anyways, I was initially unsuccessful, or I didn't get the money right. I didn't get the money initially because they had run out. But then I got a phone call from Canada Council, I think at the beginning of March of that year, basically saying, well, listen, we have extra money. There's money coming. And since you were highly recommended in this program, we can recommend that funding go your way. So I did end up getting some money, right? So just an example of how this does matter. Fiscal year timing is important in terms of strategy. All right, so yeah, so and just riffing off that, so funds may still be available, and often are. At the end of the fiscal year, travel grants may still be approved. All right, and strong proposals are often encouraged at the end of the fiscal year. I think it's also important to note that the travel itself doesn't have to happen before the end of the fiscal year. It can happen later. It can happen later in the year, but you just need to get your grant in before the end of the fiscal year. All right, so. All right. So, right. So, planning across fiscal cycles. So, some of you might be thinking in terms of, longer trajectories, longer time arcs. And I think that's a totally valid and very, very thoughtful way of shaping your project, right? So if you want to plan across fiscal cycles, across multiple years, and let's say it's a 3-year trajectory you're looking at, year one, you can dedicate to research travel, all right? And then year two, you can dedicate to project development. and year three you can dedicate to exhibition or publication. All right, so I think if you're thinking in terms of longer trajectories, um, I think, yeah, a shape like this shows that you are really thinking through your project, thinking through the specifics of your project, and making it as fulsome and as comprehensive as possible, right? And juries like that. Juries like to see a lot of thought um, and foresight given to project planning. All right, so it just in a competitive context, it just maximizes your chances of being successful. All right, so okay, so how do you build a strong proposal? All right, so I think what I'm telling you is, this is obvious. We're talking today within a very specific context, which is curating, visual arts curating. But I think what I'm saying is actually quite universally applicable to all the arts, and it's essentially what jurors, peer assessors want to see in every application. So just contextualizing it a bit, relativizing it a bit for visual arts curation and curatorial research. What is important is a clear research question. All right. Um, why travel is necessary for you to carry out this research, right? A specific travel plan, um, who you will meet, and we can talk about this more. And obviously, you may not have all the names of the names of all the artists that you want to meet or all the people that you want to meet in your research travel. I mean, that's obviously you can't know everything beforehand. Things change, but it is fine. It is completely fine to mention names in the application, even if they haven't confirmed. I think the important thing is, and yeah, the important thing is that you reach out to people, right? If there are artists that you want to meet as part of your research for this project, reach out to them, like email them. You've begun the conversation, even if they don't respond, right? You've still reached out, and some of them may respond before you put in your grant application, and some may not, right? It's just people are different, right? But as long as you've started the conversation, you don't need a confirmation email from them. It's great if you have confirmations from them, and definitely if they are confirmed that you're going to be meeting with them, they're going to be part of this research, mention it in the application. But you can also mention people that you've reached out to and that you're still in quote unquote conversations with, right? That's totally valid to mention that. And it shows, yeah, it just shows, even if they haven't confirmed, it shows initiative on your part. Okay. So who you will meet and um, how the research connects to future work. All right. And yeah, future outcomes. Right. So those are the put it back there. Those are the key things I think of building a strong proposal. Okay, so okay, this is public draw waiting for insider insight. Okay, so because I was on a peer assessment committee just a couple of weeks ago, which of course I cannot get into specifics about because we're bound to not divulge anything, but I can certainly speak in a general way about it. It wasn't obviously it was not an Indigenous arts jury. it was a different jury altogether, different uh, thing altogether. But I think my experience in that jury, I think it's I can speak in a general way about what peer assessors are looking for in grants and uh, how the best applications were able to separate themselves from the rest. All right, so all right, so what jurors are looking for? So a common theme, a common word that I've already used a few times today is clarity. All right, so clarity, purpose, right? A clearly defined purpose and long-term impact. Okay, um, so those are, I would say, the three key things that we looked for um, at that. Just speaking to this last experience I had, which wasn't that different from my other experiences on peer assessment committees. This is pretty accurate. These are the three things we look for: clarity, purpose, and long-term impact. Okay. The long-term impact, I'll qualify this. I think for curatorial research, it is definitely relevant. It may not be as relevant in other competitions, right? Other types of competitions. You don't, if it's a creation thing, if it's a creation project, that might be really, really hard to gauge, right? But for the purposes of what we're talking about today, I think um, this is definitely relevant. All right, clarity, purpose, and long-term impact. So let's just lean into clarity a bit. So, I just to give you context, uh, I in this last competition that I was on the peer assessment committee of, um, I read 75 applications. So, and that's actually in the low end. Usually I read way more. I usually read way over 100. And when I've done Canada Council applications in the past, I've had to slog, I and the other jurors had to slog through 100, usually over 100 applications. So and these applications aren't like short. They're not like two paragraphs. They're long, right? So there's a lot. We're doing a lot of work, right, as peer assessors. So the more succinct and clear you are from the get go of your application, the better. Okay, so jurors should immediately know in the project description. And the project description or proposed activities, I think, is how they phrase it in the Canada Council application. That's one of the very first questions they ask. So it has to be very clear from the get-go what the project is, so in this context, what the travel involves, what your itinerary is, who is involved, okay, and again, what the research question is. Okay. Avoid vague proposals because weak proposals leave jurors guessing. Okay. So again, it's so important to not leave your jurors guessing. The fewer questions a juror has about your application, the better its chances of being successful. The bigger its chances the better its chances of being ranked highly and being successful and being in the money. Okay. Um, I mean, it's not getting, it's not becoming easier to get these grants, right? The success rate, I don't want to discourage anyone, but I just want to be realistic with everyone here, right? I mean, these grants are kind of difficult to get. The odds are against you, right? There was a competition that I inquired about. Um, this was Ontario Arts Council, and um, the success rate for that competition, which historically was in the 20% range. Historically, that's kind of how it's been, right, over the years. But this year was like 13%, um, the success rate. And just based on my conversations with people, it does tend to be in that range, in terms of both provincial and Canada Council funding. The range, the success rate range is in the 13 to 20% ballpark. All right. So, you know, uh, jurors are in a mindset of saying no, right? Like if there's a question, something that they're not sure about, and that the jury discussion, the discussion among peer assessors doesn't really solve, then it's not going to bode well for your application. So again, yeah, the clearer everything is, the less question marks there are, the better your chances. All right, so why now? So this is another, I think, key thing that you want to uh, talk about in your application. Why this project now? Why is it relevant? So jurors also ask, why this project now? Strong applications explain why the timing matters, right? What opportunity exists at this present moment. All right. And something I didn't list there, but how is it unique? Have there been other projects that you're aware of that have happened? And if there have been similar research projects, how does yours continue? Extend that in a meaningful way, or how is it different? Okay, so all right, sec. All right, long-term impact. So with regards to long-term impact, strong proposals show how the research will influence curatorial practice, what future projects may emerge, um, how the work benefits artists and communities. All right, and yeah. So, and again, stating the obvious, travel is hardly ever the final goal, right? It's just part of what you're trying to accomplish with this project, right? Okay. All right. So eligible expenses, just a good thing to go over. Um, Transportation, all right. That includes local transportation. So if you need to take the Uber or taxi or whatever, or public transit, in the location you're in, or locations that you're in, you'll want to include those approximate costs. Accommodation is an eligible expense. Per diems is an eligible expense, and research fees are an eligible expense. All right, so it includes your subsistence while you're doing your research. You need to pay yourself, right? So um, okay, so we talked about Canada Council for the Arts. That's kind of been our main focus for today, since we have people from all over. But there are also provincial opportunities that you can explore. I'm not as knowledgeable about all the provincial and territorial opportunities that are available for curatorial research, in the 10 provinces and 3 territories. Um, but it's some, depending on where you are, some provinces do support travel through things like research grants, professional development grants, Indigenous arts programs, like Indigenous specific arts programs. So I can give you two examples. So Ontario Arts Council and BC Arts Council, I think there is funding available for curatorial research projects. And yeah, I think they're in, certainly in BC, where I'm from originally. These grants would be available through their professional development stream, their individual arts grants, and arts and circulation and their circulation and touring grants, right? So, and with Ontario Arts Council, I believe they do have Indigenous and there is an Indigenous and culturally diverse program there that specifically is about Indigenous and culturally diverse projects. So, and of course, there's the visual arts project stream that you can look at as well. All right. And there's actually, I believe there's also an Indigenous arts projects stream through Ontario Arts Council that you can look at. All right. And if we have anyone from up north, territorial opportunities as well, you might want to look at. So northern funding bodies may support travel, such as the Northwest Territories Arts Council, the Government of Nunavut Department of Culture and Heritage, and usually these will support. I think you have to be. I'm not sure if you're from outside the territories and doing a project in the territories whether you can, whether you're eligible. You may not be, but definitely if you're a resident of those territories, you can apply. So, all right. Okay, so just some common application mistakes, and we'll talk about this a bit more as we after the presentation proper, but some common application mistakes that I've encountered in the assessment committees that I've sat on. And I think these apply generally, right? The purpose of travel is unclear, right? Or there is no research question, or there's no connection to future work. Okay, so again, relativizing it to the context of what we're talking about today, but really, again, it's just reiterating the theme of being really clear as possible and really being as intentional as possible in what you're planning to do and in the activities that you're proposing to undertake. Has to be a really clear intention behind them, behind each activity, and how it connects to the goals of your project. Okay. All right. And conversely, strong applications have clear goals. Okay. They have meaningful relationships. There's a strong level of cultural awareness and sensitivity, and a long-term vision articulated. Okay, which again connects to long-term impact. All right. All right. So some key takeaways that I'd like you to, some key takeaways from this webinar for you to munch on. Research travel is often the first stage of a project. So again, if you're looking at multi-year trajectories, the research travel would be kind of would constitute the first phase of that project, your project. timing and fiscal cycles matter, especially with regards to Canada Council. So you now know it's April 1st to March 31st. That's their fiscal year. Okay. And again, clarity, the theme of clarity, clear proposals, crystal clear proposals stand out to jurors. All right. So, um, practical advice, yeah. And I'm happy to impart this from my many years as a grant writer and grant consultant. Plan ahead, and also as a working artist myself, plan ahead. Don't do things or plan things the last minute. Although I understand that's we're often in a panic situation because it's really it's a precarious we're all it's a precarious field that we're in. We're all making trying to make ends meet, often in very difficult circumstances. But as much as you can, plan ahead, right? Identify who you will meet. And I hope I was helpful in saying that you don't need to have confirmations from everyone. Some confirmations are definitely helpful, as many confirmations as you can, definitely. But as long as you've initiated the conversation with the artist, you can absolutely put that in the application. Just be transparent about it. Just say, artist X hasn't confirmed, but I have reached out to them, right? Um, and yeah, connect travel to future projects. Okay. All right. So some final thoughts. And again, I just want to acknowledge something about my own position here. I'm not an Indigenous curator myself. I'm not in the visual arts, so I'm not in a position to speak about how Indigenous curatorial practice should be approached or navigated. I think what I can share is what I've seen from the perspective of someone who works with grant applications and has participated, as you know, in a lot of peer assessment committees. So one thing that comes through very clearly in strong research proposals is the importance of relationships and context. Curatorial research travel is rarely just about gathering information. It's also about listening. It's about taking the time to meet people, spending time in places, and understanding the context in which the work exists. Um, Many funders recognize that meaningful curatorial work begins long before an exhibition or project is realized. Um, the research phase is where ideas begin to take shape and where connections are built. Okay. So when writing a travel proposal, it can be helpful to think about how you communicate that process, right? So how the research, the conversations, and the site visits will inform your future work. All right. Okay, so I thought we'd do a kind of a group exercise right now, and then we will have time for questions. But before we do the questions, I want to just to ask you to all to participate lightly in this exercise where we're going to read a couple of examples of fictional project descriptions. All right, and I just want you to be aware of uh, kind of in each application. Just want you to be aware of what makes each application uh, strong or weak, right? So, okay, so I prepared a document and I'm going to share the link in the chat. So just give me a sec here while I switch screens. Oh, sure. I'm going to stop sharing for a bit. All right. All right, so what I'm putting in chat right now is a document which should be visible to everyone. I've made it shareable. Anyone with a link should be able to open it. So there are two fictional project descriptions there. All right. And I just thought maybe we'd read through them and then just kind of offer some feedback about each of them. All right. And I think, yeah, in the hopes of making you all more aware of what separates a really strong application an application that you want to fund from the rest. All right. So does everyone have access to the document? Have you all opened it? Okay, cool. Great. Okay, so I don't think I need to share the screen for this, but if everyone can see the document, if everyone has the document in front of them, do we have any volunteers in terms of, so yeah, let's just read it out loud because I'm all about embodiment. I think embodying things is really important to get out of our heads. Are there any volunteers to read? Let's look at the first example, example one. Any volunteers to read example one?
Sure, I can read.
Okay, great, go for it.
So we've got example one, the proposed activity, or the title is Mapping Northern Indigenous Artistic Practices, and the proposed activities are: this project involves curatorial research travel in Northern Canada to learn more about contemporary Indigenous artist practices and to develop relationships with artists and arts organizations working in the region. Through visits to several communities, galleries, and cultural organizations, I plan to explore how Indigenous artists are responding to environmental, cultural, and social issues in their work. During the travel period, I will conduct studio visits with artists, attend exhibitions and cultural events, and meet with curators and arts administrators to discuss current trends in Indigenous art. These conversations and experiences will inform my cultural practice and contribute to the development of future exhibitions that highlight Indigenous perspectives and storytelling. The research will focus particularly on land-based practices and how artists are engaging with place and community through contemporary art forms. I hope to gain a deeper understanding of the connections between Indigenous identity, land, and artistic expression. This research will contribute to my long-term curatorial work and will help me build relationships with artists and communities that may lead to future collaborations and exhibitions. It will also expand my knowledge of Indigenous art practices in northern regions and strengthen my ability to curate projects that reflect the diversity of Indigenous experiences.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's stop there. And okay, so what strikes you about this application? What are some thoughts you have about this project description? It could be strong points, weak points, whatever. What are your impressions about this project description? This is for everyone, and anyone can
It's a bit vague. It's a bit vague. It doesn't list like what artists, what art organizations, or what regions.
Right. Yep, I agree. I would agree. Yeah.
Feel free to unmute yourself to contribute.
I think I also would want to understand why, like what the benefit of, like, I mean, the benefit is clear to most of us, but I think I would like to understand why they feel like expanding to learning about a bunch of different Indigenous cultures is important to them. Like how does that benefit their curatorial practice, and the artists that they're working with?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that actually reminds me of something that I want to bring up, which is I think it 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 may be totally clear to us as artists applying to grants what our intention is, right? But you can't assume that's going to be clear to the people reading it, right? So, which is why to the peer assessors reading it, which is why I really encourage here's a tip. I really encourage, if you can, if before you submit your application, running it past somebody else, right? Preferably another artist, but not necessarily an artist in your field, right? Because you just want to ask them, is my intention coming across clearly? Keep in mind also that depending on what program it is, I'm not sure actually with curatorial projects, but in some instances you'll get multidisciplinary juries, right? The peer assessor will not always be all visual artists, right? So, I've assessed visual arts applications, and I'm not a visual artist at all, right? So, um, that's why it's really important to make sure as much as you can that your intentions, what might be very clear to you, is also coming across in the application. That's going to be read by people who are not you. So
That was a great suggestion, Jennifer, about benefit, but also made me think about they didn't really say what their curatorial practice was, like what their interests are. Um, yeah, so I feel like that would be really helpful to know in that quick little overview.
I would also add the why now, since it doesn't really, it feels like this could be done at any point in time. So is there a reason for why this should be done at this moment?
yeah, I agree. Okay, cool. All right. So let's look at example 2. All right. So do we have any volunteers to read example 2?
If none from the guests, I can read it for us.
Okay. All right. Go for it.
All right. Project title is River Knowledge, Curatorial Research on Land-Based, oh wait, am I on the, no, I'm the right one. Curatorial Research on Land-Based Media Practices in Northern Communities. Proposed activities. This project is a 3-week curatorial research trip to the Decho region of the Northwest Territories to explore land-based media practices among Indigenous artists working with sound, video, and installation. The research will focus on artists whose work engages directly with river systems, seasonal land use, and community knowledge transfer related to water. During the research period, I will visit Fort Sampson, Wrigley, and 2 artist-run cultural spaces in Yellowknife. The travel will include studio visits with 3 artists whose practices explore land-based storytelling through media art. I will also meet with the staff at Decho First Nations Cultural Center and local arts coordinators to discuss current community-based art initiatives. The goal of the research is to develop the curatorial framework for a future exhibition exploring how Northern artists use media technologies to document relationships with land and water. In particular, I'm interested in how artists combine digital media with traditional knowledge systems and community memory. This research will allow me to build relationships with artists and cultural organizations in the region to better understand the local context in which these works are produced. The conversations and site visits will directly inform the development of a future exhibition proposal and public programming that centers Indigenous perspectives on land stewardship and environmental knowledge. The research will contribute to my ongoing curatorial practice focused on Indigenous media art and will help establish long-term partnerships with artists, cultural organizations in the North. Back to you, Chris.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right, so thoughts, impressions about example 2? And yes, you
This
can
one
come.
is just a lot more specific about like where they're going, what they're doing, who they're meeting. Um, So a lot less vague in terms of like what the funding is going towards.
I agree. Yeah. Anyone else?
Although I think this one was really excellent, it did make me question, like, do they know any artists working in these mediums in the North that they want to speak with? I think that was like midway, I was like, do they even know that there are artists working in those places that they said they would visit that are doing this work? I think that would be the only question I had, but otherwise it was excellent.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree. And I think, again, as I mentioned before, I think it's really good. It'll definitely strengthen your application the more specifics you have. So if you have specific artists that you've reached out to, definitely mention them. If they confirm that they want to be involved in this, great, mention them. But even if they haven't confirmed, but you've reached out to them, you've begun a conversation. So as long as you're transparent about the fact that they haven't confirmed, but you've reached out to them, you can mention them in the application. So
Yeah, I think that again, to layer on what you're saying, Jennifer, um, they said two artist-run cultural spaces. It would have been nice if they named the ones that they were hoping to go to and just said, we haven't reached out yet.
yeah. Yep. No, that's great. I mean, because obviously, example two is the example of is the you know the example I'm upholding is the stronger of the two. But even this one, it's great that you all are picking up. They could be even better, right? And that's exactly the kind of critical eye that you want to develop, especially with regards to your own applications, right? When it can be more difficult to develop a critical eye, right? So. All right. Any other thoughts before we move on? Okay. Well, we're in the wrap up phase right now, so I'm just get back to where I was. So all right. I'm gonna share my screen again. So just give me a sec. Oops. All right. Well, I mean, we're pretty much done, but not quite because we have time for questions and answers and comments and just discussions about anything that you know I've addressed today. Have been a great group. So yeah, I'm happy to open the floor and maybe we can talk amongst ourselves about the things that this webinar addressed. So I'm happy to answer any questions that I can answer. Again, I'm not in the visual arts, so it's anything visual arts related. I can't really answer, but that's maybe something that other people here can jump in and offer their opinions on. But what I can certainly answer, or what I can certainly talk about, is experiences I've had as a peer assessor, assessing, applications from artists in multiple disciplines, and and also anything generally regarded to to the art of grant writing. So yeah, so
Well, thank you, Chris. We do have one question from our chat. Before I read it
okay,
out loud, I'm just going
sure.
to say to everybody, this is your chance to ask Chris and the ICCA team your questions about curatorial travel grants planning and how to leverage these opportunities. Please add your questions to the chat and we will discuss them now. You can also raise your little hand and we'll call on you to unmute. So the first question I have is from Cameron, and it's, would you recommend applying 3 months before the end of the fiscal to increase your chances, or do you have another better timeline?
Yeah, I think 3 months is good. Yeah, 3 months is good. That's a really good timeline. Yeah, I would say 3 months is good. Um, yeah, that's the sweet spot actually, because you're not leaving it too far before the end of fiscal for it to, get difficult to for it to be difficult to get money. But I think especially if you're applying for a travel grant as opposed to applying to creating, knowing, and sharing, the travel grants generally have a quicker turnaround period, right? So yeah, I think 3 months that's good strategy. So
Okay. I do want to mention too that I believe travel grants are rolling, whereas like short-term or long-term plans, project grants with CKS have uh, deadlines. In fact, one of them is coming up April 8th. So
yeah,
I'll give that details at the end though.
sure, yeah, not but that's good to know. Like I wasn't because I don't do a lot of creative knowing and sharing um, grants. I'm more familiar with the general grants, but yeah, travel grants. The general travel grants are rolling deadline. Yeah, there's no set deadline for that. Yeah, so
Thank you. Thank you, Cameron. Next question we have is from Jennifer. I am curious about accessibility needs and including them. This includes this includes for things like disability or needs for parents to travel with their children. How would you go about this?
yeah, I think that's a great question, and definitely I would include. Yes, I would include those in the budget for sure. That's a totally valid expense, and I think the peer assessors, and not just peer assessors, but also uh, if it's being adjudicated internally through by Canada Council officers, I think they'll really appreciate that. So I would definitely include it in the budget, and also include it in the narrative in the narrative of the application, right? And so yeah, definitely apply for what you need. Definitely, yeah. Don't don't try to. I really discourage people from not applying for things that they actually really need, um, or not including those in the budget, just because they want to have a better chance of, because they feel like they're asking for too much. But no, you actually do need to ask for what you need, right? So, yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to add in that too and say I've juried before, and people have lost points for asking for too little because it infringes on your feasibility. The more detail, like if you need $637.50 for childcare, put exactly that. Put exactly that. And add in an extra day just because you might need it. Contingency is important too, especially travel. Are there any other questions? No? All right.
Anyone interested in being a county council juror? I don't. Has
pay
anyone
well.
been a Canada Council juror, or you have? Okay, great.
Yes, I have. For creating knowing sharing. Oh, Jen has too.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. Yeah, it's so yeah. I don't want to speak for everyone, but it's challenging. Like it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. They do pay you, it's good. And as a freelancer, I pretty much need to say yes to every time I'm invited, right? So the money's decent. It's decent, yeah, but it is a lot of work. So yeah, and but it's a really, if you can get on a jury, and I believe, if you're interested in being a juror, you can. I think there's a form you can fill out. There used to be anyways, but there's a form you can fill out on the Canada Council site, right? But it is a good experience to be on a jury, because it gives you it just gives you a real insider knowledge of the process, right? So, and it will help with your own applications. So.
I just wanted to quickly say, being a juror, it wasn't until I was a juror that I got a successful application, was after that, because it really teaches you how people are looking at it. It's nice being paid to do it, but I also say yes as often as I can so that I can learn from how people are reading grants and talking about them.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a great way to pull that curtain back. Sorry.
It's been generally I've really generally enjoyed my jurying experiences, even when there's been conflict, and there's sometimes has been conflict. But I have found them, it's also just great to meet other artists, right? Who are, in other parts of the country often, or working in other disciplines, right? It takes you out of your bubble, right? So.
It really is professional development and networking in and of itself.
For sure. Yeah, I see it as a micro grant, a little bit of a micro grant. I mean, yeah, not really, because you need to put in the work to get to be paid. But yeah. I've used it as micro grants in the past. I've saved the money I've gotten from jurying, and I've used it to, for take time off work to write, right? So yeah, it's my regular job. So.
Perfect. Well, I'll do one more call for questions or comments, or even anything anybody wants to discuss. No?
All right. Okay. Well, it was a real pleasure being with all of you today and sharing, my knowledge with you about grants and the grant writing process. And I hope that you found this helpful. Yeah, if you have any other questions, this is my contact info. Oops, what happened there? Okay. Here's my contact info. So yes, you can feel free to email me, and you can also reach me on Instagram if you're on Instagram. Yeah, I'm also available for one-on-ones. So if you need help with a grant, or need consulting, or need assistance on writing a grant, just contact me. And my rates are very flexible. And yeah, happy to help whenever I can. So.
Appreciate that. Well, thank you so much, Chris. This was a really insightful session on curatorial travel and research grants. Your guidance on planning and aligning travel with professional goals was really invaluable. I know that there's a couple tips that I'm going to be taking to work. A reminder for all attendees that the Canada Council for the Arts primary deadlines are crucial for effective planning. We encourage you to review these and strategize your applications accordingly. Depending on the profile that you've designed in your new CCA portal will determine what you can apply for. Those deadlines I was going to mention are the short-term projects deadlines for this upcoming fiscal are April 8th July 22nd, and November 4th. And long-term projects closes May 20th. We also want to highlight upcoming opportunities for peer exchange and mentorship. So even if you just want to practice a travel grant, you can apply for a travel grant to come to Whitehorse 2027 for ICCA's Gathering. That's August 24th to 27th. Planning your research travel now can position you perfectly for significant events like this, and you can find more information at icca.art/gathering. Thank you all for joining us for this grant webinar series part 2. We hope you found these sessions helpful in navigating funding opportunities. We will send up a follow-up email with the links to the recordings once they're made live, as well as a AI transcribed summary of today's session. If you wish to support our ongoing work in amplifying Indigenous curatorial advices, please consider becoming an ICCA member. And we hope that you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Chris.